You don't procrastinate because you're lazy. You've been told that your whole life, and it's wrong. Laziness is not caring. You care. You care so much, it's suffocating. You can see exactly how the thing should be done, which means you can see exactly how it could fail. And your brain, the same brain that makes you capable of doing the work, is also the brain that won't let you start it. That is not a character flaw. That is a specific psychological mechanism. And once you understand it, you can't unsee it. Here's what's strange. The research on procrastination almost never goes where you expect it to. Most people assume it's a time management problem, that the solution is a better calendar, a tighter deadline, a stricter morning routine. And for decades, that's exactly how psychologists treated it. They built systems. They designed planners. They told people to break tasks into smaller pieces and reward themselves for finishing. Some of it helped. Most of it didn't stick because none of it was addressing what was actually happening inside the brain of the person who couldn't start. In the 1980s, psychologist Lenora Yuen and her colleague Jane Burka at the University of California ran one of the first serious clinical studies on chronic procrastination. They weren't studying students who turned in assignments late. They were studying people whose procrastination had cost them careers, relationships, and years of their lives. People who were, by every external measure, highly capable, intelligent, creative, often overqualified for the work they couldn't bring themselves to do. What Yuen and Burka found wasn't a deficit of discipline. It was a specific kind of fear that intelligent people are particularly vulnerable to. Fear of being evaluated, not fear of failing exactly. Fear of being seen trying and still coming up short. Because if you never truly start, you never truly fail. The work that doesn't exist can't be judged. And the smarter you are, the more precisely you can imagine exactly what that judgment would look like. This is the first mechanism. Psychologists call it self-worth protection. The logic, buried beneath conscious awareness, goes like this. Your intelligence is the thing you've built your identity around. It's the thing people have praised you for since you were a child. You were the one who got it fast, who asked the hard questions, who didn't need things explained twice. And over time, that praise calcified into something dangerous. A belief that being smart is not something you do. It's something you are. Fixed, innate, non-negotiable. And anything that threatens that belief becomes something to avoid at almost any cost. Carol Dweck at Stanford spent decades studying exactly this. She discovered that people who were praised for their intelligence rather than their effort developed what she called a fixed mindset. They began to avoid challenges, not because they were afraid of hard work, but because hard work implied they might need it, and needing it implied they weren't as smart as everyone thought. Dweck ran experiments on children where she gave them a difficult puzzle after praising half of them for being smart and the other half for working hard. The children praised for intelligence avoided the harder puzzles. They chose the ones they already knew how to solve. The children praised for effort did the opposite. They chose the harder ones because difficulty had been framed as the point, not the threat. This is the trap that smart people walk into, not laziness, a perfectly rational defense of the one thing they've been told matters most about them. But there's a second mechanism, and it runs even deeper. Your brain doesn't just fear failure, it fears the specific kind of failure that comes with high expectations. Psychologist Alyce Ferrari at the University of Windsor found that high-ability individuals set significantly higher standards for themselves than average performers do. This sounds like a strength. It isn't, not always, because the gap between the standard you've set and the work you can realistically produce in a sitting becomes so wide that starting feels pointless. You can see the finished version of the thing in your head with total clarity. You know exactly how good it should be, and the distance between that vision and the blank page in front of you is so enormous that your brain registers it not as a challenge, but as a threat. So it does what brains do with threats. It retreats. It finds something safer to do. It opens a different tab. It decides now isn't quite the right time. This is what researchers call the planning fallacy operating in reverse. Normally, the planning fallacy describes how people underestimate how long things will take. But for intelligent, high-standard individuals, something else happens. humans. They overestimate how perfectly the outcome needs to emerge from the first attempt. They conflate the finished product with the first draft. And because the first draft will inevitably fall short of the finished product, the brain treats starting as guaranteed failure, which means not starting is, at least temporarily, the only way to remain successful. Think about what that means. The procrastination isn't random, it's targeted. The tasks that trigger it most reliably are the ones that matter most to you, the project you care about, the email to the person whose opinion you respect, the creative work that actually reflects who you are. Trivial tasks don't trigger this mechanism because trivial tasks don't carry the weight of your identity. You can clean the kitchen, you can reply to a low-stakes message, you can spend 3 hours on something that doesn't matter at all, and your brain will cooperate completely because failing at something small doesn't threaten the story you tell about yourself. Only the meaningful work does that. And so the meaningful work sits day after day while the kitchen gets cleaner and the inbox gets emptier, and the thing you actually want to build stays trapped inside the gap between who you know you are and who you're afraid to prove you're not. Now here's the part that makes this harder to solve than anyone wants to admit. Procrastination feels like the problem, but it's actually the solution your brain has already implemented. It is the answer to a different problem. How do I protect my self-concept from the risk of genuine evaluation? And the reason all those productivity systems fail is that they treat the surface behavior without touching the underlying architecture. You can add all the accountability partners and time-blocking sessions you want. If the belief that you are fundamentally your intelligence remains untouched, the mechanism remains intact. The moment the work gets meaningful, the brakes come back on every time. But here's what the research also shows, and this is the part almost nobody talks about. The procrastination itself compounds the damage. Psychologist Fuschia Sirois at Durham University spent years studying the emotional fallout of chronic procrastination. She found that procrastinators don't use the time they've bought themselves to rest or recover. They use it to feel worse. The task sits at the edge of consciousness, producing a low-level hum of dread that follows them through every hour they're not working on it. They enjoy the avoidance less than they expected. They feel the shame more than they anticipated. And when they finally do start, they often do so in a state of such anxiety and self-recrimination that the quality of the work suffers, which confirms every fear that caused them to delay in the first place. The loop closes on itself. The fear of imperfection produces a delay that produces imperfection. Sirois also found something that cut even deeper. Procrastination isn't just an emotional response, it's a physical one. Chronic procrastinators showed higher levels of cortisol, the primary stress hormone, on days when they were avoiding important tasks. Their immune response was measurably weaker. Their blood pressure ran higher. The psychological weight of undone meaningful work was not staying neatly in the mind where people assumed it lived. It was spreading into the body. This is not a metaphor. The thing you keep putting off is not just sitting quietly on a list somewhere. It is metabolically expensive. Your body is paying for it right now, even in the moments you've successfully stopped thinking about it. So what does this actually mean for the person sitting with 12 things they haven't started? The first thing it means is that the self-blame is not just unhelpful, it is structurally counterproductive. Shame activates the same threat avoidance response that caused the delay in the first place. The inner voice that calls you weak for not starting is the same voice that made starting feel dangerous. Attacking yourself for procrastinating is like trying to cure a burn by applying more heat. The mechanism doesn't respond to punishment. It escalates under it. What it responds to is something far less dramatic. Psychologist Timothy Pychyl at Carleton University spent his career studying not why people procrastinate, but what actually gets them to stop. His research consistently pointed to one thing above everything else: not planning, not accountability, not reward systems. The willingness to begin badly, to produce the first version with full awareness that it will be inadequate, to separate the act of starting from the standard of the result. Pychyl found that the emotional resistance to starting drops sharply the moment moment the task is actually underway, not completed, not improved, simply begun. The dread is almost entirely concentrated in the moment before. Once your hands are moving, the brain recategorizes the activity from threat to process. The identity protection mechanism disengages because the evaluation is no longer hypothetical. You are already in it. The worst has already started happening, and it turns out the worst is survivable. This is something your most prolific ancestors understood without naming it. The people throughout history who produced the most were not the people with the highest tolerance for failure. They were the people who had learned through repetition that starting badly was not the same as being bad, that the draft and the thing were different objects entirely, that the version of themselves sitting down to begin was not the version who would be judged when it was done. The work was not a mirror held up to their intelligence. The work was a process they moved through, and intelligence was the tool they used to move through it, not the thing being tested by the outcome. Here's what you are actually doing when you procrastinate on the work that matters. You are protecting a version of yourself that can only remain intact by never being tested. A version that is theoretically brilliant, theoretically capable, theoretically the person who could do the thing if only the conditions were right, if only there were more time, if only you felt more ready. That version is safe. It is also completely imaginary. The only version of you that is real is the one that exists in contact with the actual work, flawed, uncertain, producing something that falls short of the vision in your head in the first draft, and moving forward anyway. Every person you have ever admired for what they made started from exactly the same place you are standing right now, not knowing if it would be good, not certain they were the right person to make it, sitting with the same gap between what they could see in their mind and what their hands could produce on the first attempt. The difference is not that they had more confidence, it's that they had developed, often through failure so repetitive it lost its charge, a tolerance for the distance between the vision and the beginning. They had made peace with the fact that the work starts ugly, and they had learned deeply enough that it changed their behavior that beginning ugly was not the same as being incapable. It was the only path that existed to being capable. You are not lazy. You never were. You are someone who cares enough about the work to be afraid of it. That fear is not your enemy. It is information. It is telling you that the thing you keep avoiding is the thing that actually matters to you, and the only way through it is the same way it has always been, not when the conditions are perfect, not when you feel ready, right now, with everything exactly as uncertain as it is. The first sentence, the first line, the first move in whatever direction seems least wrong, because the version of you that starts imperfectly is the only version that ever finishes at all. And somewhere on the other side of that first bad draft is the thing you've been carrying in your head, waiting, as it always has been, for you to decide that beginning badly is better than never beginning at all.